Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today I'm super excited to show you side by side the Tudor Pelagos and the Tudor Black Bay 58. These are two very popular dive watches in Tudor's catalog. Arguably two of the most popular watches in general in Tudor's catalog. Now the Tudor Pelagos retails for $45.75 and the Black Bay 58 currently retails for about $3,700. So in the $4,000 to $5,000 range, these are two very compelling choices. Now these two watches have been designed with very specific or very different intentions in mind. The Tudor Black Bay 58 is a watch that's designed with heritage and history in mind. It's meant to sort of evoke the feeling and design of a vintage Submariner, big crown with that red triangle at the 12 o'clock, and then sort of that warm gold tone aesthetic. And then the Tudor Pelagos is a watch that's specifically designed for diving with the end user in mind. Everything about this design is very practical. There's nothing overly pretty about it. It's extremely functional, it's light. So let's go ahead and start with the Pelagos. Now the Pelagos is a 500-meter dive watch. The watch is made entirely of titanium, so it makes the watch extremely lightweight, despite the case thickness. And speaking of which, the dimensions on this Pelagos are 42 millimeters in diameter, 50 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, thickness of 14.5 millimeters, a lug width of 22 millimeters, tapering down to 18. You can see there is a helium escape valve here at the 9 o'clock position. There is a 60 click unidirectional ceramic matte bezel. Very solid action, as you can see and hear. And one thing important or interesting is that it actually, I don't know if the camera can pick that up, but it has a very resounding click when it hits 12 o'clock. So it lets the user know when they've made a full rotation. This one is fitted with Tudor's in-house caliber MT5612. Features a 70-hour power reserve. It's COSC certified, so it'll run within chronometer specifications of -4 to +6 seconds per day. The watch features one of the most advanced clasps that I've ever seen. You can see there's some nice ceramic ball bearings fixing this double deployant clasp. And what makes this such an interesting clasp is that there are very high levels of on-the-fly adjustment. Lots of customization here. You have 3 positions, and then you also have a 4th position, which actually allows, it's kind of spring-loaded, and it allows the watch to expand and contract with the motion of your wrist. And I'd imagine that this would be very useful on the outside of a dive suit as well. It's a very no-nonsense, fuss-free watch. The design language of it almost gives me kind of Sea Dweller vibes. I do prefer the black, although I think the blue looks very nice with this watch as well. Kind of gives it a very unique color, unique vibe. So let me go ahead and pop it on my 6.5-inch wrist. And as you can see, this watch wears very beautifully. It is tall, and there's no denying that. The fact that this watch is so lightweight, you know, it's entirely made of titanium, you don't really feel that thickness. Now you do see it. I mean, the visual presence of that tall case is definitely there, and that in and of itself could be an issue for some people, but it does not wear heavy. It does not wear top heavy on the wrist. I have an Omega Seamaster 300 coaxial, which I've also reviewed on this channel. That one is made entirely of stainless steel, and that one will just sit much heavier on the top of your wrist. It'll probably get caught up on some dress sleeves, but in its entirety, this watch is still thin enough to slide under any jacket or coat sleeve. Let me pop up a lume shot here. It's a huge selling point of this watch. It glows in this fantastic blue color. As you can see, the bezel itself is also lumed. Very long lasting, very legible, amazing execution. You can see a matte ceramic dial as well. The hour indices are kind of recessed ever so slightly into the dial, creating kind of a very dimensional or sandwich kind of effect. There's quite a bit of text at the 6 o'clock position here, with a Pelagos chronometer officially certified, rotor self-winding, 500 meters, 1640 feet. It's not intrusive. Some people do prefer the non-in-house version with only 2 lines of text. And it's important to mention that that one is actually a little bit thinner than this one. I think it's just under 14 mil thick. So about 0.5 millimeter or so thinner than this one, which some people will appreciate. But for me, I like the additional power reserve. Just the fact that it's an in-house movement, I think is a cool kind of perk as well. Let's bring on the Black Bay 58. Now this is a very stunning piece as well. You can see that it just oozes vintage appeal. It's definitely a lot dressier, a lot prettier than the Pelagos. And the first thing you'll notice is all the different colors, the accents around the bezel. All the font around the bezel is in this gilt accent. And then the triangle around the lume pip is a nice touch as well. That's a nod back to vintage Submariners from Rolex and Tudor, the big crown varieties. And then you can see there's quite a bit of gilt accents on the minute track, as well as on the hour and minute hands and seconds hand, and then also the text at the 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock as well. I think it looks really warm, and it really evokes the 50s Submariners in my mind. When I wear this watch and I look down at it, I almost think that I'm wearing like a vintage sub. That's how spot on Tudor was with the proportions and the design cues. Now you can see that there is sort of like a faux rivet style bracelet. Everything on this watch is sort of meant to evoke the vintage sub. That's kind of what these faux rivets are trying to accomplish. I don't mind them. I've heard a lot of criticism over them, but I think it actually adds to the vintage appeal and charm of this watch. Even though they're faux rivets, I personally don't have any issues with them. And I think it really separates the Tudor bracelet from the classic Oyster. The case diameter is 39 millimeters. The thickness, and this is a big one, or small one I should say, is only 11.9 millimeters. The fact that Tudor was able to get this down to under 12 mil thick on a 200 meter dive watch, I mean, it's amazing, and it really makes a difference on how this watch wears on your wrist. The lug tip to lug tip is 47.5, nice and small as well. The bracelet is 20 millimeters, tapering down to 16 millimeters. Now this is also running Tudor in-house caliber. This is the MT5402. And part of the reason why Tudor was able to get the thickness of this watch down was because of the thinness of this new caliber. It's an in-house movement, COSC certified as well. 70 hours of power reserve. Both these watches tick at 4 Hertz. This watch also has a 60 click unidirectional bezel. Ever so slightly not as easy to turn as on the Pelagos because the knurling is a little bit smaller, a little bit lower, but still very nice action. And better action than on most dive watches I've experienced. And it also does have a sharper, deeper detent at the 12 o'clock position, just like you would get on the Tudor, which I find to be a very nice touch. Now the lume on this watch is really good as well. It is a green lume. The bezel itself is not lumed like on the Pelagos, but you wouldn't expect it to be, since this is not really designed to be like a tool kind of diver. The crystal is actually like a boxed sapphire crystal, so very vintage inspired. It looks really nice. The clasp on this watch is very nice, very small and compact, which I think is great just in terms of day-to-day comfort on the wrist. Let me open this up. It also has a twin deployant. It's not as easy to open as the Pelagos. You can see there's also ceramic ball bearings there fixing the clasp together, which will boost the longevity. Very nice milled out finishing as well. This reminds me, because it's polished, it reminds me a lot more of the clasp on my Rolex Explorer and a lot of other Rolex Oyster Perpetual models. This one does not have any on-the-fly adjustment, no easy link, but it does have 3 holes for micro adjustment. So you can fine tune this, but there's just no on-the-fly adjustment, which, you know, it's a slight gripe, but I found that because this watch wears so small and so light and so comfortable on the wrist, I don't really find a need to have to continue to adjust the fitting of it. Whereas a watch like the Pelagos, there's a lot more wrist presence and it weighs a little bit more. So I found that I kind of need that on-the-fly adjustment a little bit more with like a heavier watch. But on this one, and I'll show you, it wears very light. You know, I actually got it sized to where it's a little bit loose. I don't mind it sliding around my wrist as much just because of how small and light it is. This one wears very similarly to my Rolex Explorer 214270, which is also a 39 millimeter and is just slightly thinner than this watch. And you know, there are some guys who are into watches that have a little bit more heft, a little bit more bulk, and I totally understand that. I was in that camp actually when I first got into watches. And then over time, I found that if a watch doesn't need to be thick and hefty, I tend to feel that it's a little superfluous. It doesn't need to be as chunky and heavy on the wrist. In my mind, it represents sort of a lack of refinement. And just from a day-to-day comfort perspective, I really prefer the lighter watches. I can put the watch on and I can basically just kind of forget about it. And I'm not always like slinging around this giant slab of metal on my wrist. That's actually the reason why I've let go of my, original 2018 Seamaster. That watch, it was very solid. Tech-wise, finishing, everything looked really beautiful, but it just sat way too heavy. There's no taper to the bracelet. The clasp was massive. Over time, I could not wear that watch on a day-to-day basis. That watch did look really nice on a rubber strap, and I did get the OEM rubber strap for that one. I just connect with the bracelet, and I feel like it's a very fundamental part of the watch. If the watch doesn't work on the bracelet, I don't connect with it as much. So that's just my personal kind of preference. But because this watch is so thin and so light, it works with a variety of different outfits. It can slide under pretty much any dress sleeve. It can definitely slide under any jacket sleeve, and it's just very versatile. Much more so than the Pelagos. But as I mentioned, these two watches are really designed with a very different mindset. The Pelagos is just, like I said, no nonsense, very lightweight, amazing adjustability, amazing lume, really easy to turn bezel, crown guards, nothing superfluous or glossy or polished. And then the Black Bay 58 is definitely meant to evoke that vintage charm, and it's made to look a little prettier and a little bit more wearable because of its lightness and its thinness. When it comes down to choosing between these two, it really comes down to personal preference. And if you're looking for a watch that's just very practical, doesn't look too dressy, and gets the job done, and if you also happen to do some diving or a lot of aquatic types of activities, the Pelagos is definitely the watch for you. If you're like me and you're kind of like a desk diver, you're active enough to where you like to have a dive watch, you like the water resistance, but you also kind of want a watch that's more versatile, more of an all-arounder. You could wear it to more situations, more occasions. I would say go for the Black Bay 58. And like I've said before in previous videos, it really depends on what's in your existing collection as well. So let's say you already have a bunch of dressy pieces, you have maybe a dressy diver like the Seamaster, and you're looking to add another dive watch to your collection that's maybe a little bit more tooly, then I think the Pelagos would be a good option. If you already have more like utilitarian watches in your collection, like you have a Speedmaster, or you have more like monochromatic watches, or just like black and white, for example, then I think the Black Bay 58 would be a solid option because it does add a little bit of pizzazz, a little bit of dressiness, a little bit of color. And I am partial to this black version. I know that there's the new navy blue Black Bay 58. That one just never spoke to me as much aesthetically. Blue to me is a little too drab. Part of the reason why I really love this model is because of that red triangle at the 12 o'clock. And there's no type of color variation on the blue version. So I'm partial to the black version. I really, and I love vintage subs. I love how they look. So the black would definitely be my choice. But I can see the appeal of the navy blue one as well. It's just a lot more understated, more neutral looking, not as eye-catching. Let me know which one you would prefer between these two. So thanks again so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate you guys tuning in and continuing to support the channel. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Cheers.